Hi there, welcome to the 18th Annual Damn Short Film Festival. Once again, we're doing live stream Q&As. So welcome. I'm Lee Lanier, co-founder of the festival and also director of continuity. We're up to International A, International B, and Drama E for the Q&A. We have one filmmaker with us today, and that is Timothy David with the film Fulcrum. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun to chat with people about films, so I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So avant-garde is an interesting category. I love avant-garde films, and particularly with animation, and we tend to group them together. One thing about avant-garde films, though, is sometimes they're kind of hard to describe to people. So if you had to describe Fulcrum briefly to somebody, how would you describe it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I have like this synopsis that's like a sentence or two that talks about like rowing through time and space and then through the shape of the universe, maybe. So it's yeah, I think the reason why experimental films are probably hard to sort of quickly define or give a synopsis of is because they're often an experience and not not so narrative. And that experience can change, obviously, from viewer to viewer. So I think the experience of the film is hopefully one of, oh boy, just, I don't know. I guess I'd say that, the film is all based off of the movement of like rowing. So like rowing a boat, and then how that expands out. So how like one movement or one gesture can then be indicative of, the larger movements and gestures and shapes that are just around us at all times, I think.
Yeah, we're discussing the film this morning. We watched it again, myself and Heather. Heather was scheduled to do this Q&A, by the way. You saw her name on the title card, but she had some other festival business to take care of, so I jumped in.
No problem.
And we described it as like immersive, right? Tried to explain it to her. I see it as immersive. It's like you experience it, like you just said. So it is hard to summarize it, particularly when it's animation or when you have it with other films or maybe live action, and it's just so hard to sum up. I'm glad they're there. I really like seeing the fact that people are kind of pushing the envelope on the short films. And I think it's a great place for short films. Do you see advantages to the short film format for yourself with experimental filmmaking and animation?
Yeah, I always think that like short films and music videos, which can sometimes be made as a kind of short film, are really where like the boundaries of film are being pushed the most. And I think often that those things end up in the bigger, more lucrative types of filmmaking, like Marvel films or something. You'll see sometimes these little snippets of things that were like clearly inspired by some kind of obscure short film or idea that you see in experimental film. So I think it's really the best space for people to be exploring what's possible. I mean, you can't really tell that much of a story in a few minutes, so it makes sense to me that we try to sort of explore the medium itself during that time.
Well, it's interesting you say that some of these filmmakers rub off on the commercial industry. You'll see influences here and there, even all the way up to Marvel films, right? Uh, yeah, your other work aside from Fulcrum, is it more commercial or do you have a long line of like avant-garde type work?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of this experimental stuff. I've done some like visual music type things and a lot of work with just shapes and
Mhm.
basic shapes and I would say color, but a lot of it's kind of more black and white. So I think texture is interesting, and I like to explore texture, which black and white does more.
Mhm.
I think it does better. I think you notice texture more in black and white than if you have color, because
Mhm.
color and texture can be kind of competing for
Mhm.
space in your sort of visual the allotment of like visual space that you have in your brain or something can
Mhm.
only handle so much.
Right,
Um,
right. Well,
so
it's interesting you mentioned, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting you mentioned it's black and white. I didn't even think of that at the time because many of your backgrounds are very white. It's against white fields, right? So it's not like black and white, like film noir or something high contrast. That's an interesting thing. I didn't even think about that as I was watching it. Um, I'm sorry, but go ahead. We were about to say.
Oh, I was gonna say, I mean, I have done some commercial work and I
Mhm.
do work in that way sometimes, but it's definitely not my wheelhouse, not something I'm thinking about. But I'm aware that is out there and that is influencing a lot of people. Like a lot of people don't sit around and watch short films all day,
Mhm.
or don't really watch short films as much at all, maybe. But
Mhm.
a lot of people do know the big blockbusters. I mean, that's why they are what they are, I guess.
Right, or
Um,
even TV commercials. I mean, which are a strange form of short film, but it's great to see people pushing the envelope and it trickling down and a wider audience enjoying it. I mean,
yeah.
maybe the only downside would be that the people who kind of were the trailblazers are not known, not well known, or perhaps forgotten. It's a bit of a thankless kind of job sometimes, but I'm glad they're there. I mean, I count myself in the same categories. I have a filmmaking background myself. I made really strange avant-garde films also. So, like I said, I really love the genre. So in terms of animation, seem to be multiple techniques. What kinds of techniques did you combine in terms of animation itself?
Yeah, this film kind of has everything. I mean, this film, I think it's a little over 8 minutes, and it took
Hmm.
me probably 5 years
Wow.
from like the first time I had the concept to like
Hmm.
actually finishing it. And part of that was because it's not like I don't work for pieces like this. I don't work with a storyboard. Like I knew it was going to be 3 parts, and I knew what the first part was. And I had this idea of what the third part was going to be, which is probably pretty obvious what that part is. But the second part, I wasn't sure. Like, how do I link these two things together?
Hmm.
And so, I was working like a lot of the film was actually made in 3D software, and then everything is hand inked so that it all
Hmm.
sort of hopefully ties together, which is a process that I don't think I should do any. It was like it was really brutal because it was like 12 frames a second. It was I didn't even shorten it to 8 or anything, and yeah, so I guess it was a lot of that for especially the first part, like trying to get the rowboat and the character
Hmm.
to kind of turn somewhat gently in dimensions and not have to try to do that in a hand animated format. Um, and then there's the second part is mostly like some stop motion work, and it's also been inked over, and that was shot in my garage with like a character that I built in a little green screen. And then the third part kind of combines all of those, except it doesn't have the stop motion in it. But it's some of the computer animated stuff that is that's just kind of parsed out and singled out on its own, and then some hand animated things as well, like hand drawn animated things. Um, that hopefully, I mean, I hope that people can see some of those things because the way the film works, the
Hmm.
animations are always kind of getting smaller and smaller,
At
as
the
the
end,
last
they're
few
pretty
minutes.
tiny. Yeah, just as a
Yeah,
reminder, yeah, I was going to say, for anyone who's just joining us, we're talking to Timothy David from the film Fulcrum. So check out Fulcrum. It's in Drama E. Now, Drama E says drama on it, but it's a combination of various avant-garde films, including animation, just everything that's a little experimental. So it's interesting in terms of the techniques because sometimes it's hard to recognize, even as a fellow animator myself. what's being used. I did recognize stop motion. The hand inking, I wasn't sure if he had physically done it or if it was a computer, addition to it. So it's amazing what kind of torturous forms of animation exist out there. And just when you think it can't get any more painful, it's like, oh, stop motion. Oh, sand animation. Oh, is there a form of animation you'd like to try, or one that sounds like it'd be way too difficult and time consuming for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of approach, I've done a bit of this before, where I'm kind of creating images maybe on a computer, or combining the way that I make the image, and then ultimately trying to tie the art direction together in some like final way. I think it is a little too torturous. I think I'm getting to the point where I'm not necessarily as interested in spending that many hours a day hunched over a computer, just feeling bad because my posture has been bad all day, and then
No.
my whole energy is messed up. I just can't like get up and move. So I think I'm moving a bit away from this, or trying to find ways of simplifying this. And I think that's partially why it took so long. I mean, I think some of those frames inside the like body of the whale would take for like 45 minutes just to do one. And then you do, a second,
You,
you don't even do a second of it a day. And it's just,
in terms of the inking over the
yeah,
animation, or yeah.
yeah, it was really brutal. And so, I mean, in terms of like what I haven't done that I would like to do, I think a lot of the stuff that I do combines different forms, and I'd like to do that in a way that's maybe a little bit more apparent to people.
Mm,
So like I haven't really used like live action stuff or worked with miniature sets.
mm,
And I feel like combining those things in a way that like makes a world that is completely unique to that project, that sort of feels like it's of the real world, but not of the real world, maybe
mhm.
somewhat surreal or something. That's something I want to try, but it's a matter of learning how to work in those new, how to build a tree in 3D that, like in
Mm,
actual like modeling that doesn't look terrible and would look good
mm.
on camera or something like that. And
Okay.
yeah.
Now, did you make this film completely by yourself, or did you have anyone else help you on it? Was it just purely solo?
I had a friend do a couple of the hand-drawn animated things because he's just really good at that stuff. And
Mm,
I mean, for the last section, it was really a matter of trying to figure out like all the different concepts I can get into that point. And so I was thinking, okay, the whale and the person and the boat and the motion of these things all are the same thing at this point. And then there's like the rhyming lines. To me, what was like a rhyming line of like the hair, and then the underbelly of like a humpback whale that has these lines that go down it. So I was thinking, how can I do this? And I just, called up one of my friends that is a great animator and said, hey, can you just brainstorm some things we could do with this, and then just throw them out to me like for fun, like, if you don't want to. And so he did a few. Like there's a really cool animation where the girl sort of like bends down and then jumps up and does a flip, and then in the air she turns into the whale and the whale splashes into the water. And so he did that, and a couple of the other the hand drawn things. So
mm.
he would rough them out and then he would send them to me, and then I would do all the final stuff. So it was like as low impact for him as possible.
So a lot of it was yourself. It's almost a solo show. So what's the biggest challenge of working on a film by yourself, particularly for several years?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think of it as like the challenge is probably the endurance part of it,
Mm,
for a film like this. And I finished a couple other films while I was working on this and took breaks from it and really struggled to figure out what the hell was happening,
mm,
for some parts of it, and like wrote it out at one point and then threw it away and then rewrote it and then tried to hire a storyboard artist to do it, and they wanted so much money. I said, I'll just figure this out myself. And then that was like the turning point. I was like, I can do this.
mhm.
So I think there's like just the endurance part is the hardest part for me. But I think I've made live action films and films where you have to get crews and cameras and location permissions. And I just would rather do anything than a lot of that stuff. And also like, if you don't have money in those situations, you're
Mhm.
always dependent on someone else and hoping that someone doesn't have a bad day and say, no, you can't use my house, even though you spent 2 weeks preparing to like
Mhm.
get everyone there at that time, and it's so much like producing work that
Mhm.
I don't like. So I think the benefit for me is that I just get up and just work on it whenever I want.
Mhm.
And if I'm feeling down that day, I don't work on it. Or if I'm tired, to take a nap in the middle of the day, and then,
Mhm.
on a weekend, and then work into the evening, and it doesn't change the project.
Right.
It doesn't affect anyone else. So I appreciate that openness that I have
Mm.
with my animation as a
So I guess
practice.
it's, yeah, I guess it's good that you're your own boss. It has good plus sides and negative sides to being your own boss. So it's
Yeah.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
Um, in terms of film festivals, what's your perspective on film festivals? How important do you think they are? How does it tie into your own filmmaking?
It's an interesting question because I feel like it's changing a little bit
Mhm.
for me, because I think that, I mean, I love film festivals, and I love going to festivals, and even when they're online, I mean, I have a lot of fun. I think, this festival opened up yesterday, and I watched a bunch of them, a bunch of things yesterday,
Awesome.
and I found another film that has like a rowing character in it, and then I
Yep.
found
Yes.
another animation, and I looked up another film from that animator, and then that animator had a film that had rowing in it. It was like all these weird like rowing things. I was like, this is really interesting. Um, so I mean, I think for like the types of these kind of more experimental films, it's kind of where they typically live,
Mhm.
and I love it. But the cost of submitting to film festivals and trying to figure out how to manage all of that.
Mhm.
That's something I've done for well over a decade now.
Mhm.
It's something that I'm just I think I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, if a film should go to a festival or if a
Right.
film has a different life. And I don't know. I think that especially the experience of going to the festival and meeting other filmmakers, and I've made lots of friends and collaborators and things, and I think that's always going to be there and
Mhm.
always going to be something I appreciate. Um, but I'm curious. I think 10 or 15 years ago, music went through this big shift where it was,
Mhm.
now becoming digital, and now artists aren't making as much money on their album. They're making it through YouTube and shirt sales and whatever.
Right.
And now movies are making this change where we're not really doing theaters. COVID
Mhm.
kind of brought on this shift of like, now you rent a movie in your home for $20 or something.
Mhm.
And I think that there's going to be a big shift, and I'm not entirely sure where everything that I do fits into that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's it's tough to tell. I mean, in terms of film festivals, hard to say how they're going to evolve with all this as we come out, where everything's going to lie at the end. But I was going to mention that, yeah, I mean, for those who might not know, when you make a film, that's part of your job. But then if you plan on having it seen, there's another job where you try to get it out there in terms of managing submitting the film festivals, sending your copies, possibly traveling to it. And that's a whole nother addition. Now, luckily, that's gotten easier with digital and it's even easier with virtual, but it's still this huge thing a
yeah,
filmmaker can undertake. And it might not be something that filmmakers do indefinitely. There might be a period where you feel that it's a really good fit, and you move on to, like you said, other avenues for your work. So it'd be interesting to see
yeah,
what happens with that. Yeah.
yeah. I think festivals are also getting like harder and harder to get into,
Yes.
because just the number of submissions, and
Hmm.
there are certain festivals, like everyone wants to get into this festival or this
Oh,
festival,
yeah.
and so like they're rejecting tons and tons of great
Yeah.
films. Like they have to be. you
Yeah. I
know.
mean, we're medium size. I don't know. We get over 1,000 submissions, but we only program 125 to 175, somewhere in there. But
Yeah.
still a lot of films get turned down, and of course, it's somewhat subjective. You have to worry about your local audience. So yeah, there's a lot of people getting rejected. I have to say, I've noticed when I did this circuit in the late '90s or up into the 2010s or so, that it definitely has gotten harder to get into. And it was bad then, but now it seems like ridiculous odds against everyone. It's like, yeah, it's just like it can be, you know, you can feel very bad about that. But you have to remember, it's people don't know you. They have to make these tough decisions, and it's not a reflection
Yeah.
of your work. But it's hard to keep doing that and just hitting the wall each time. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, every time a festival sends me a letter that says we don't want to show your film this year, it
Oh,
usually says this, we got more submissions than we've
yeah,
ever got before, and it's done
yeah,
that for the last like 5 years. It's like we've never had this many submissions,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, some are
So
tens of
that's a big part of
thousands.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very democratic, but you can get lost in the weeds. One thing I
Yeah,
wanted to ask is, where are you located? Where are you working out of?
I'm in California. Yeah, I'm in the Monterey Bay area in California.
Okay.
So
And are you self-taught or did you go to school for animation?
yeah, mostly self-taught. I mean, I went to a school for a long time, a little too long, but I have like a master's in poetry writing and a
Oh,
master's in
wow.
English. And then
All right.
when I was in Colorado doing my master's in poetry, and I was making a lot of films. And before that, I was at a TV station, and when I worked at the TV station making like public service announcements, um, I learned very quickly that there was a limit to the technology that we had, like the camera
Mhm.
that we had, and the the lights and the budget, but there was no limit to what I could do on my own. I could work
Mhm.
in, this was just pre and around the time of HD. So I could work in HD on my own. I could
Mhm.
animate. I could, if I could just if I could learn more After Effects and more Photoshop and more of those things, I could make better quality things for my job. And again, I didn't have to pack the camera. I didn't have to load the truck. I didn't have to drive to the location. And so for me, that's kind of where it started. And I taught myself, and then um, just kept doing it and kept doing it. And so when I was in that master's program for poetry writing, I was making more films than I was writing poems. I mean, I guess I was doing both a lot because I had the time, but I was making a lot of films. And from there, I went to do an MFA in film and video production, but it wasn't like specifically an animation driven thing. So I have a degree in that, but I was teaching animation at that time, and that's what I do today. I
Yeah.
teach animation at Cal State Monterey Bay. So um, yeah, so I mean, I'm always telling my students, like it's really great to have someone to help you and to teach you like the weird little things that you might not know, that you might not find out unless you worked out in a studio or have done it
Mhm.
for a long time. But you don't need me for like the big stuff. you know
Right.
like you need me to teach you that like there's this one little weird trick when you're doing lip sync that you like, after you sync it all up, like
Mhm.
try moving it a frame forward or maybe a frame backwards, and like sometimes that will just magically
Mhm.
sync up the lips in a way that looks or feels better, and just those weird things that no one really teaches you.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, it's interesting. We have one of the genres we get in batches, not necessarily every year, is spoken word short avant-garde films. So I don't know if
Hmm.
you've done one of those, but the combination of like literal poetry, somebody reading poetry, or at least the words, was some of the interesting images. So usually get a
Yeah.
batch of those. It's always interesting to see. I guess the opposite of that would be the silent films we get every year. There's no dialogue. So,
Yeah.
but it's a good genre. Well, I think that might be a good place to wrap it up. So, Tim, I appreciate you joining us again. Tim has made an animated film called Fulcrum and Drama East. You guys check it out. It's a very interesting film, very surreal, but you'd see you put a lot of work and passion into it. So, thanks again. I'll mention a few things about what's coming up here. Get my script here. So, our next Q&A is going to be coming up at 2 o'clock, and that's a music video. It should be very interesting, and Svetlana Stepanova will be hosting that. And remember, you can vote for your favorite films, and you have until 2 p.m. Sunday Pacific Data Time, Pacific Data Time, Pacific Daytime, I guess you'd say, to vote for that. And we'll announce the winners on Sunday night. So we hope you join us for that. So thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Whenever I'm with you, I am alright. There's something about the way you make me feel inside. I'm counting down the days till we fly away, heading to the sun, only you and me.